Hello, Brovs. We're back with The Wandering Heir, A Christmas Story by Charles Reade. There's no sight of Christmas in the story. We're in May of whatever year this is. I can't remember. But there's a trial going on, and there's about 30 pages left, and maybe 40 pages left in the book. And we are nowhere close to Christmas. So I don't know how it's going to turn into a Christmas story, but we'll see. Then they brought two medical men of high character who had probed Eaglestone's wound and declared the shot had gone not downwards but upwards, and indeed at a considerable angle, and that the blisters at the back of the body caused by the shot were several inches higher than the wound. This double proof was irresistible. It agreed with Annesley's account and Fisher's, and it destroyed Eaglestone's testimony that the gun had been shouldered. This closed the defendant's case. The judge summed up briefly. He said the sting of the indictment lay in John Eaglestone's evidence. The other witnesses for the Crown had proved nothing but the killing, which was superfluous, since the prisoners admitted it. That, as to Eaglestone's evidence, it was highly damnatory, but unsupported by any other witness, and contradicted in one vital part of it by the two surgeons. Another respect, viz., as to whether the act was intentional, the same witness was contradicted by himself, and in the worst possible way. For while the act was fresh in his memory, he had said repeatedly that it was accidental, and it was only when his mind had been worked upon by some person or persons not present at the act that he had come to say it was intentional. Against Reading there was not the shadow of a case. Against Annesley the charge of murder had failed, but they must consider whether it was manslaughter or chance medley. If they thought the gun went off accidentally, it was chance medley. The jury, being invited to retire and consider their verdict, said through their foreman there was no need for that, as they had made up their minds long ago, and thereupon brought it in chance medley, which was, in fact, the verdict of acquittal. The court then discharged the prisoners on the spot, and in 5 minutes Philippa and James were rattling down to Staines in a chaise and four, which McKercher, who knew he had made the verdict safe, had provided, and ribboned the horses. He followed in a chaise and pair with Reading. Chaise and pair, that is. James and Philippa sat hand in hand all the way, with hearts almost too full for words, and the church bells rang for his escape, as they had for hers. Philippa flung her arms round McKercher that night and kissed him, and blessed him so that the good-hearted sharper shed a tear. He told her that all the blood that was in his heart was at her service, and what he had done for James that day in England was child's play compared with what he would do for him in Ireland. He was off to Ireland next day, but he left a sting behind him. Ere he had been gone a month, out came a volume called Memoirs of an Unfortunate Young Nobleman, in which, under the thin disguise of Anglia for Anglesey, Altamont for Altham, and so on, a full and interesting account was given of James Annesley's wrongs and Lord Anglesey's vices, including his trigamy and other matters not relevant to James Annesley's concerns. Lord Anglesey at this time was in a stupid, sullen state. He had left the court disappointed, rebuked and exposed. He stormed at Gifford for his defeat, and quarrelled with him, and would only pay half his costs, whereupon Gifford sued him. Anglesey employed a solicitor. He subjected Gifford to interrogatories. McKercher heard of them, and subpoenaed Gifford for the Irish trial. Anglesey, though he swore he would run his sword through McKercher at the first opportunity, dared not indict his publisher for the memoirs through libellous. Though libellous, he lay quiet even when the gentlemen's magazines came out with the whole substance of the book and made him a byword throughout the nation. Nevertheless, this stirred him up an unexpected friend. Charles Annesley wrote to him and said, "This is a very serious matter. We had better lay aside all differences and make common cause against this upstart, James Annesley." Lord Anglesey replied that he did not know which way to turn. He had drained himself already in trying to unmask that impostor in Ireland and hang him in England. Charles Annesley replied that he would find 10,000 people, or £10,000 that year, sooner than see the estates and title transferred to this upstart by perjury and lying romances. Thus encouraged, Lord Anglesey drew largely on Charles Annesley, and I still don't know why their names are different, and went into Ireland and employed agents of all sorts and poured out money like water. I guess Anglesey's probably like the location he's at. His presence and influence were soon marked by a sinister event. Pat Higgins, McKercher's clerk, returning to Dublin with valuable notes of evidence, disappeared together with his papers. McKercher, whose own corrupt practices were bloodless, vowed he had been bought by Lord Anglesey's men and sent out of the country. But he was never heard of again, and it is the general opinion in Ireland now that he was made away with by persons in the employ of Anglesey. McKercher now got leases signed by James Annesley and put his leases into possession of several farms in Meath. Anglesey ousted them by force, and Campbell Craig, one of the tenants so ousted, who was a tool of McKercher's, served the writ of ejectment on Lord Anglesey in the Irish court and exchequer. This brought the matter to an issue, and the cause was set down for trial. Though the actual property in litigation was small, all the Irish estates of Lord Anglesey depended on the verdict in Craig versus Anglesey. Of that, the parties were agreed. But meantime, James Annesley had fallen into deep dejection of spirits. The malicious prosecution had done him good. It had stirred up his resistance, but now a jury had acquitted him. He could not forgive himself for having killed a man. McKercher comforted him, rallied him, but all in vain. He actually wanted to drop the proceedings against Lord Anglesey. "He will beat me," said he. "I shall never thrive. I have shed innocent blood." McKercher was first sorry, then angry, then alarmed. He wrote seriously to Philippa about him, and she wrote back directly, "Send him to me." In anticipation of his arrival, Philippa made Mr. Chester buy James a horse, and she had a riding dress made so masculine that she could speak her mind more freely in it. She had also a country dress for walking made, and when he came, she encountered his melancholy point blank with hilarity. "Your spirits want a Philip, sir." "Your spirits want a Philip, sir," said she, "and I must give them one." She rode with him, she walked huge walks with him. She would not let him mope or pine. She was Philip one moment, all vivacity and cheerfulness; Philippa the next, all tenderness, and neither out of place. Her resolution, with her wit and her tenderness, attacked his despondency with so many weapons, in such minute pertinacity, that at last she drove the dark cloud away, and the man plucked up hearts again to fight his enemies, and love his sweetheart as she deserved. And here I cannot help observing that if this man's misfortunes were almost unparalleled, so his good fortune in finding so rare a woman as this to love him was almost as singular. I believe that, at this juncture, she saved him from the madhouse. Well, she had her reward. She saw the color creep back to the beloved cheek, the brilliancy to the dull eye. She saw the shapely head held up again, and at last she heard the beloved tongue bless her for what she had done. And now I really think they would have been married but for Thomas Chester. He had been for some time growing rather cold to young Annesley, but seeing him so downhearted, had not spoken his mind, but he now took an opportunity and had it out with him. He said, Mr. Annesley, if you had come to me as a poor gentleman of no pretensions, I think I should have said to you, show yourself willing to make a livelihood, and you shall have my niece, since matters have gone so far between you. But you call yourself the son of Lord and Lady Altham, and others say you are not so, for my lady never had a son. I assure you, sir, on my honor, and I assure you on my honor, that you do not remember the circumstances of your birth any more than I do mine. Therefore, sir, by the kindness that is between us, I beg of you not to abuse your influence with my niece, by urging her to marry you, unless you can make good your pretensions. I could show you it would be unwise to take any other course, on account of the singular powers Mr. Hanway and myself possess under her father's will, but I prefer to appeal first to your honor and delicacy. James Annesley replied with perfect dignity, Mr. Chester, after the stain that has fallen on me, I have never asked my dear Philippa to marry me, but since you offer her to me on condition that I can prove my birth before a jury of my countrymen, I take you at your word, and so be it. And, sir, I bear you no ill will for this. You are an honest man and Philippa's true friend, and to be your friend is to be mine. That is very handsomely said, young man, said Mr. Chester. Annesley thought over this for an hour or two, and after dinner he burst out before Philippa. Sir, you have roused me from my lethargy. I value Philippa's hand more than I do the lands and title I have been robbed of. I shall start for Ireland tomorrow. So soon, said Philippa. Ay, sweet one, said he, and if I am not the true Earl of Anglesey, I will never trouble you again, nor your good uncle. Philippa turned pale and knit her black brows at Mr. Chester. Uncle, said she, you have been saying something to him. No more than my own conscience says to me, replied Annesley, before the old lawyer could speak a word. James Annesley stood firm and parted from Philippa tenderly, but hopefully next day. Philippa was inconsolable and kept her room. When she did reappear, her uncle saw with regret that he had lost her affection. She scarcely spoke to him, never volunteered a remark, and treated him with a bitter coldness that distressed him. However, he felt sure he had done his duty, and his niece would see that too some day. So he remained firm, but he was uncomfortable, to say the least. She went about the house pale and gloomy, knitting her magnificent brows, and never speaking nor smiling, except when she got a letter from James, and then it was as if the dead had come to life. Ardent kisses on the paper, eager devouring of the contents, eyes streaming, and then away to some secret place to read it again, all alone. At last he made an appeal to her one day. He said gently, Philippa, let me ask thee a question. Dost thou really think Thomas Chester is thine enemy? The girl hesitated and then said, Why, no. Then knowest he is not, but loveth thy father dearly, and loveth thee. Then would it not become thine years to say, This is an old, experienced man, who loves me. Let me not condemn him hastily, lest I fight against my own good. The sullen eyes began to fill at that, but never a word. However, he said no more, for he saw the shaft had gone home. But 2 days after this came a letter to say that the trial, after several postponements, was to be that day, month, by special appointment, and that McKercher was hopeful, though not confident. The assassination or spiriting away of Higgins, with his notes, the fruit of 2 months' research, was very unfortunate. The letter had been a week coming. Philippa brought it to Mr. Chester, and coolly putting her arm round his neck, as if their attachment had never been interrupted, she said, Uncle dear, please you read that. So he smiled, well pleased at being Uncle deared. Again, all of a sudden, and he read the letter. Well, said he, At all events, it will end his suspense and yours. Uncle dear, said the young lady, you asked me, did I doubt your affection? Well, of course, you cannot love me as he doth, but I do think you love me a little. Well, that's a fucking backslap. In your way, but that I shall soon know, for I shall put it to the proof. Uncle dear, if you love me, go with me straight away to Dublin. He started and then said, that is as if you should say, sweet uncle, I know you love me. Take me into the pit of destruction. Oh, fie, fie! What else is litigation? If I take you to Dublin, you will be every day in court, as you were at the Old Bailey. Sore against my wish, and here 'twill be 10 times worse, for you will hear him taunted by counsel, and exposed by a score of witnesses, and defeated in the end. The young lady smiled superbly. Uncle, said she, you are learned in the law, no doubt, but most unlearned in women's hearts. Each word you have spoken is a chain of steel, and draws me to Dublin by the heart. Had you but said, he will surely win, and can be happy without thee, for a time I had yielded. But when you tell me he shall be defeated and shamed over there, then I am here on hot coals, and cannot bide. Know that I love him, as men, methinks, cannot love. I grudge him no triumph all to himself, no solitary joy, but trouble, and I not to have my part, shame, and I not blush with him. Nay, but I tell you, not one sup of grief, sorrow, shame, or any mortal ill shall ever reach his lips, but I will have my share on it, by the God that made me, made me for no other use that I know of, but to console my darling. That is the very pearl of goodness, and the butt of misfortune from his birth. She clasped her hands with angelic fervor, and was gone with the words. The old lawyer looked after her admiringly, but sadly. She is too good to last, thought he. I fear she is like her father, and will never make old bones. Then he fell into one of the long reveries a thoughtful old man is subject to, since the past offers a larger landscape to him than to the young. He had been thus an hour and more, when in came a swift foot. He looked up, and there stood Philip, in the very clothes he had last worn at Willingtown. He had put on with them his old audacity, with which, however, a hot blush was doing battle. Now, uncle, said he sharply, how is it to be? Will you go to Dublin with Philippa? That is a poor timid creature, afraid of men and mice and everything, or shall Philip go alone? Philip that fears not and feels like Alexander the Great at this moment. The Lord be praised for doublet and hose. Mr. Chester interrupted her. Thou brazen toad, come hither, and let me look at thee. What is this indeed, the disguise thou didst prank thyself in out there? Uncle, and will again, if you are unkind. Come now, old man, time flies. How is to be? How is to be? I can't turn this frickin' this page is gonna kick my ass. Mr. Chester uttered a groan of resignation. Needs must, when such as you drive, said he. Go you upstairs this minute, and doff that masquerade. Tomorrow we will set forth, and be in Dublin this day week, God willing. What the hell is this? The hell does this even mean? Looks like a baby and a woman. I don't understand these drawings. Anyways, chapter 10 awaits us. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye.